they'll join us shortly. Where we left off yesterday, we were still busy working through lesson 4. You might recall. So we saved that file halfway. We've got the halfway file open now. Now, Kapansa, if you want to open up the lesson 4 there, you're more than welcome to. You'll still be able to go through the rest of the exercises, even if you missed some of the things yesterday afternoon. So don't worry too much about that. We're just going to be proceeding through with some of the on well, it's called page 3 here. It's this green page. And we are looking at this image that we placed in yesterday, that we copied in there. And you might have found it odd that I proposed to pop as we creating a text wrap around the object. Now, what's quite cool about InDesign is that you can create a text wrap between images on different layers. So this yield sign, at least in my project, this yield sign is in my object layer. Oh, sorry, my graphics layer, I think we called it. Yeah, that's right, graphics. So it's in the graphics layer, whereas the text is in the text layer beneath it. So even though they're in different layers, we're still going to be able to get this text wrap to work, which is a really nice feature in InDesign. So to do a text wrap, we don't even have to leave the properties panel. If we want to do a more advanced one, maybe. But if we just want to do a very basic one, you'll find it straight in your properties panel. So under properties, you will see there is the text wrap section, which has various options there. So text wrap, and you can see some of the selections. So the first one there is no text wrap. Then we have wrap around the bounding box, wrap around the object shape. Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit cut off there. Jump object or jump to next column. So we do have a few different options there. So now we will need to get a little bit more intricate with this particular one, but you can try out those different text wrap options for now and see if they yield different results. You'll also see that you've got this spacing, or the offset rather, that you can set for this. So if you increase the offset, you can push the text off the bounding box a little bit there, just to give it a little bit of breathing room. All right, morning, Michelle. Don't worry, you haven't missed much. We're still just working on that lesson 4.
Morning. Sorry, I had extreme network problems this morning. So sorry about that. Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's sorted.
Grand. All right, we haven't done much. Literally all I've done is I've just added a text wrap to this little yield sign that we placed on yesterday.
Okay.
So very, very easy to do. You'll find the text wrap with your, if you selected any picture, you'll find the text wrap in your properties panel here.
Okay.
Now, as I was saying, guys, for most objects, a little square wrap like this is probably fine, right? Even if I look at this image now, I'm just going to hit W to preview it out. It looks fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with going with the sort of basic option, the square wrap there. But with something like this yield sign, it might be interesting if the text followed the shape inside of the frame. Now, you might think that you could then just choose the wraparound object shape, but that doesn't seem to work. That doesn't seem to yield the results we want. So we need more options than what we have available here. Now, this is a fairly sort of common occurrence that the properties panel has some of the functionality that you need, but not necessarily all of it. And that's why we might then bring up another window. So I'm going to head over to Window and Text Wrap. Which is going to bring up this little dialog box. Now you might think this looks identical, and in many ways it is, but when we choose the wraparound object shape option, you will see that we've got a few more settings to play with here. Sorry, I'm being attacked by Mickeys, so if you see me swatting things intermittently, I'm not gesturing, it's just bugs. So we've got the wraparound object shape, which was an option here as well. But as I said, now we see more settings. So we see the contour options, which is what we're interested here. So in the contour options, you can choose detect edges. So by choosing detect edges, it's looked for the edge of the image inside, and now you can see it's actually got a bit of a triangular shape, like the yield time. All right, so we can see that there. Now, as you can see, I've added a little bit of an offset, so a sort of a few points there. You can really choose how far away you want the text yourself. But I've just got a little bit of an offset. I've set it to wrap around the object shape, and in the contour options, I've set it to detect edges. And that I think is looking, that's looking decent. All right, so that is the text wrap. It's a small function, but it's something we do fairly frequently when we're bringing in images to place onto very wordy documents. The next thing that we're going to do is a little bit of rehash with the with shapes and paths. So yesterday, you might recall that we adjusted the shape of this little text frame here. So we had this text frame and, we started off by just dragging it down a little bit to make it longer. But then we took our direct selection tool and we moved up one of the anchor points. So we moved just one corner of the text frame. So that was working on those individual anchor points. We're going to be doing something similar now, working with those anchor points, working with those paths, but we're going to be applying it to a different section, a different context. So what we need to do, first of all, is make sure that our background layer is unlocked, because otherwise we won't be able to edit it. So we're going to be adjusting this green rectangle here, this green page. So to do that, just make sure that your background layer is unlocked. Then you can go ahead and select your green rectangle. Now, what we're going to be doing is not only manipulating the individual anchor points, we're actually going to be adding anchor points to this particular shape. Now, that's actually really easy to do. If you guys look over at your pen tool.
Sorry, Andrew, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
How do we get that little block highlighted? Do we need to drag it or do we just have to click on it?
Yeah, just click on it with your selection tool. If it doesn't work, just check that your background layer is unlocked first.
Okay, how do we do that?
Oh, sorry. So head into your layers window.
Yeah, I'm there.
Great. And you'll see if you've locked it, it should have a little lock symbol. All you do is just click on that lock and that'll unlock it.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Lovely. Okay. So we've unlocked the background layer. We've selected it with our selection tool. And now, if you go check out the toolbox with your pen tool in it, you'll see that it has an add anchor point tool, a delete anchor point tool, a convert direction point tool. You can select those individually, but the pen tool is quite versatile in and of itself. So if you just select the pen tool and you hover over an existing path, right? So an existing path would be this one, this rectangle here. As I hover over it, watch how my icon changes. So this is what the cursor icon looks like normally. As I hover over a path, you'll see it gets a little plus sign. So automatically, it actually switches over to the Add Anchor Point tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an anchor point where you see the intersection of this guide and the path. So when you see the little plus sign, give it a click, and there you can see it's added that anchor point.
Sorry, Andrew, I have another question.
Yeah.
Would it be a star if it's not a plus?
So normally it's a star, which means that you're going to be starting a new path.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that symbolizes. So it's only when you are directly over an existing path that it will show the plus sign. So the plus sign shows you, oh, I'm going to add an anchor point to this. If you don't see the plus sign, it's not gonna work. So you need to make sure that the path is currently active. So if you look at my screen, you can see that the green path is currently highlighted there. If I had selected off it, you wouldn't see that green path.
Okay, is that because my background isn't, because I'm clicking on that little block on the top to get this whole background layer highlighted, but it's not working.
Okay. Okay, so just to double check, so we have unlocked the background.
Yes.
Cool. All right, and then you took your selection tool and you just clicked somewhere on that rectangle.
Okay, yeah. So if I click on that rectangle, I think
Yeah.
I'm in the text layer then, because then it moves to text. So must I just drag it?
Oh, yeah. So you can just in the layers panel there, just drag that down into the background layer with that little square.
Okay, it's working. Okay, now I use my pen tool.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, it's working now.
Grand.
Thanks.
All right, awesome. So you don't have to delete that anchor point tool because we're going to use it, but just to demonstrate something, if you hover your pen tool over an existing anchor point, then you will see the icon changes into a delete anchor point tool. So so sort of it changes its functionality based on what you hovered over. So the pen tool is pretty useful in that regard. Another little thing I'll show you now is that if you hold Control, you'll see it turns into a selection tool. So that's pretty nifty. If you hold Control, it turns into a selection tool. If you hold Alt, it changes into a convert point tool. It's such a handy little device, the pen tool. But more on that later. What we're going to do now is we're going to add one more anchor point down here. So that is at the intersection of this next guide. You'll see this one down there. I'm going to place an anchor point tool right there on that guide. Right. Now, we could switch to our direct selection tool. So if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to switch to your direct selection tool now, or you could hold control with your pen tool selected. Either one will work. But just for ease of reference, I'm going to be switching over to my direct selection tool now. Now, you might remember from yesterday's lesson, the direct selection tool can select individual pieces of the shape or the path. So what we're going to do is we're first just going to make sure everything's deselected by clicking onto the nothingness, the blank pasteboard here. And then we're going to click back onto our rectangle. So the rectangle is selected, but not the individual anchor points. That's why I go through that process of deselecting and reselecting. So the reason I know that these anchor points are not currently selected is that they are currently white inside, right? Whereas if I go and click on that anchor point now, you'll see it becomes solid. So that's how I know only this guy is selected, because he's the only solid one. So then I can take this direct selection tool and I'm going to drag this anchor point down to here. And release. You see how that's changed the shape? So let me know if you guys had any trouble with that. But just to sort of recap on why we did what we did there, what we were trying to do. We started off by adding the anchor points because I wanted that to be another place at which the path was anchored. So when I moved this anchor point here, these other unselected anchor points still held the path in place at those points. So that's why I put those extra anchor points there, so that I could get the exact sort of shape that I want. Anybody having trouble with that particular functionality?
I am. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Andrew.
Is it just well, tell me about
Okay,
it.
so
What's giving you grief?
okay, so the first one I managed to get my anchor point, okay, when I could see the plus.
Yeah.
So when I was trying now to get my second anchor point, I wasn't seeing the plus anymore.
All right. So there's a couple of things we might want to just check there. So the first thing is making sure that the rectangle itself is still selected. So do you still see the green outline?
Yes.
Along the cool. Okay, grand. Now, one thing that's quite tricky is that we have to be hovering directly over the path itself. So if I look at the screen here, we don't get confused with this line, this gray line. That gray line is the end of the page, but the path itself is actually right on the edge. It's on this green line. So do you see the plus sign there if you hover your pen tool over that?
Yes, okay. I'm seeing it now. It was probably because I was going to the gray line.
Right, right, right.
Okay, I've got it. So then it's my direct selection tool.
Correct. And so I recommend just clicking off everything first. So just deselect everything, click back onto the rectangle.
Okay, with my direct selection tool.
True, yeah, with your direct selection tool.
Okay, okay.
Then click on just the one little anchor point that you want and drag that sucker down to that first column.
Got it. Thank you.
Lovely stuff. All right, so that's one way to kind of change parts. You know, we can add and remove anchor points and whatnot. You know, Illustrator is really the right tool for doing very complicated custom parts, as you know, we covered in last week's course. But as you can see, InDesign does a lot of that work as well. So it's functioning pretty much identically to Illustrator in this regard. Another similarity with Illustrator is the path finder. So we can use shapes to join together or cut out from one another. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a rectangle. It doesn't really matter what this rectangle looks like. Where we're going to draw it from is the bottom corner of this bleed. So we're going to draw it from the bottom corner of the bleed all the way up to the intersection of that guide and the margin. Sorry, not margin, column. And I'm going to release. Now, to use the Pathfinder, we need to have both of the shapes we want to use selected. So we're going to grab our selection tool. And I see that one of them is already selected. So the one that I just created is still selected. So all I have to do is hold Shift and click on the green rectangle. And now they are both selected. And once you have two shapes selected, you will see your Pathfinder come up in the Properties panel. So at the bottom of the Properties panel, you will see Pathfinder. And you've got a range of different options. You've got the option to combine or add the shapes. And the one that we're interested in is actually number 2, which is to subtract. So if I hit subtract now, it's going to cut out that top rectangle from the rectangle below it. Cool. So that's the Pathfinder. It functions pretty much the same as Illustrator, just very nifty. So we can use shapes to subtract from one another, to add to one another, to create more unique creations without necessarily having to get fiddly with something like the pen tool. Very, very, very helpful there. Okay. Next, we're going to do something that's perhaps a little bit more miscellaneous. We're going to create a frame for a picture, but one that is not your sort of regular circle or square. So if we're putting in things like pictures, obviously if we put in the picture just by placing it and drawing it, by default it's going to use a rectangular frame. But if you head over to your frame tools there in the toolbar and you right click, you'll see that you've actually got two different options. You've got the ellipse frame tool and the polygon frame tool as well. We're going to choose the polygon frame tool so that when we bring this image in, it's already in the shape of a polygon. Now, if we just draw out our polygon, we're probably going to get whichever shape we used last. In this case, for me, it was a star. which is not appropriate. So if you did create something, you can just undo it. Also, I've just realized I'm still on the background layer. So what you can do before you draw your thing is just go lock the background layer once again and click onto graphics, so that we are then drawing on the graphics layer. So what we can do with this tool here is we can give it a click. So instead of drawing by clicking and dragging, we just give it a single click, which then opens up our dialog box for the polygon. So in the polygon width and height, we can, I don't know, I really don't know how big a pica is. I can't conceive of it. So let's try a size, and if it's too big, too small, we can always change it. Then in the number of sides, we're going to change that to 8. So we're going for an octagon. And the star inset, we're going to set to 0. Right, so we've got 8 sides, no star inset. And I'm going to say, OK. There we go. That is my octagon. So we can place an image into this, this octagonal frame. So with the frame selected, head up to File, Place, and in your Lesson 4 links file, there's a picture stop sign. You can go ahead and open that. So I've got my stop sign in this shape here, and it's not looking too bad. It might look different depending on what size you guys picked for your particular image there. This image is clearly on a white background. This is not a PNG or a TIFF or something that would support transparency. This is just a normal JPEG image, hence the white background. Now, there are ways to cut out the background in InDesign. They're not great. We're not going to be doing that right now. All we're going to be doing is we are going to adjust the size of the frame to fit along the edges. So I'm going to take my selection tool and I'm just going to drag in the sides till they are flush with the edges of the stop sign. Like so. Alrighty. Please let me know if you guys have any troubles with that.
Just do what you did to the stop sign.
All right, so which point are you at there, Kefis?
I think before you made it look much clearer.
All right, so does yours currently look like that?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So actually very, very, very simple. All I did was I just zoomed in, which is helpful to make sure that you're being precise.
Mhm.
I took my selection tool, I selected the frame, and then all I did was I just dragged these edges. So I just used the little handles on the edges, and I just dragged them down until they were flush with the edge of the shape, or rather the stop sign, sorry. So that's all I did there, just drag them down.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool. All right, guys, so we've got our stop sign. Now, it's a bit of a random example, which is why I'm not sure if this is the greatest use of this sort of thing, because obviously if we were going to bring in a stop sign image, we'd probably just bring in one that didn't have a background to begin with, so that there was no issue. Where you might want to use these sorts of more interesting frames is just for fun. If you want to have someone's portrait, but it's a circular portrait, use an ellipse frame tool. So that's where we might use this. One thing to point out, now that I think about it, is there is no technical difference between a frame and a shape. You'll notice there's the exact same options. So you've got the rectangle, ellipse, polygon, and in the shapes, you've got the rectangle, ellipse, polygon. They're the same thing. The only difference is visually, when you bring on a frame tool, it's got that little X in the center, just to kind of tell you, hey, I'm a frame. But that's literally it. You can bring in a picture into a shape. You can bring in text into a shape. It doesn't matter. So that's just I don't know why they did that. Maybe just to help people who are less familiar with the fact that you can bring in a picture into an existing shape. But they are essentially the same thing. Okay, let's look at what we have to do next. So we have added some frames there. What we're going to be doing now is just creating some rounded corners. We did rounded cornering in Illustrator and Photoshop. It works very similarly here inside of InDesign as well. So what you're going to do for me is you're just going to scroll up to this top page here, where there is a blue block that starts in this issue. So we're going to scroll up to that and select that blue frame there. And just to get you guys familiar with what you're looking at here, this once again is actually a text frame. If you don't believe me, you can always check the properties panel there. You'll see text frame. This text frame just happens to have a blue fill associated with it, and you can see the text frame options that they've used here. So they've clearly got an inset. You can see where that inset comes to there. So we can begin to see what other people have done just looking at the object. What we're going to do is we're going to round the corners of this. There's two ways to do this. If you just want to round all of the corners evenly, which most of the time that's what you're up to, you can do that very quickly just by clicking on this yellow square. So if you click on that yellow square, you'll see it then places 4 yellow diamonds on each corner. And then I can just drag those diamonds in a little bit. And that will begin to round out the corner of the shape. Okay. So this is, oh, sorry, apologies. I accidentally minimized InDesign. That wasn't intentional. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do it is you can select your, what you would call it, your shape, your frame, and you can change the corners in the properties panel. So in the properties panel there under appearance, so where we find our fill and our stroke, just below that, you will see corner. Now, here you can choose the type of corner that you want to use as well. So you'll see there right now it's a normal smooth round corner, but you could choose, a fancy corner if you wanted, or a beveled corner. A few different options there. And if you really want to dive into it and you want to individually change the size of corners, then you can just click on that word that's underlined there, corner. So if you give that a click, that will open up your corner options. And there we can individually work on each corner. So if you want one corner, maybe the top right corner to be bigger, you can do that. So we can increase the size. Just one thing that's a bit confusing at first, if you do it this way, you can increase the size, but if you haven't chosen a corner option, like you haven't chosen it to be rounded, it's not going to do anything. So you need to make sure that it is selected first. You've chosen the type of corner you want to have, then choose the size. All right. So those are some basic corner options which we can apply to shapes and frames. Where we're headed now is to do a little bit of alignment. So aligning is a very simple but important process for just making sure that everything is where it should be. So when we're aligning, we want to take into account a few different factors. So what are we aligning something to is perhaps the most important one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align these two, what do we call these? Objects. I'm going to align these two objects to the center of this particular frame here, or this page, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the Evolve logo. I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to select partial class calendar. So I've got both of them selected there. Now, when you have two objects selected, often by default, your align, which you can find in your properties panel there, often by default, your align will be set to selection. Now, that's just going to make sure that they are aligned to each other, which is fine, but we actually want to align this to the page. You can see you've actually got a number of different options. So we can align it to the spread, in which case, if we center it, it'll end up here. Aligning to the margins is useful if you want to align it to the left and the right, but not so much the center. So for us, align to page is going to work best in this particular case, although align to margins would also work just fine. So I've chosen align to page, and I'm going to say align horizontal centers. So that worked pretty nicely. Really straightforward stuff. Now, this is going to come up later, but I thought let's address it now while we are currently working on this image here. What we have is a group. Now you can group anything, as many objects or frames that you like. It's very easy to do. I might show you in a second. But how do I know this is a group? It's the type of bounding box that I'm looking at. If I click on any other object, you'll see it's got this very plain bounding box. It's just a solid line. Whereas if I click on this one, hey, there we go. It's got this dotted line around it. That is an indication to our eyes that this is a group. Now, essentially, what this group is a collection of letters or shapes, really, that somebody's made. Why they decided to do this, I don't know. It's just to prove a point in the exercise, I guess. Now, with a group, if you use your selection tool, you will, of course, select the entire group. So if I want to make changes to, say, the color of some of these paths here, I can't do that with the selection tool. You'll see the fill in the appearance panel gets this question mark. And what that question mark means is that there are different fills. There are multiple fills because we've got the black fills as well as the gold or yellow fill there. So if I went and I chose something there, it would affect all of them, which is not ideal. So if I go to select blue, all of them become blue. So I'm just going to hit undo. I didn't actually want to do that. So now you might think to yourself, oh no, does that mean I have to ungroup the object if I want to go and then edit individual points? No, you can just use your direct selection tool. So the direct selection tool can work on individual pieces of a group. So if I switch to my direct selection tool now, you'll see I can click on just the E or just the V. Or if I hold shift, I can select all of the black letters together, which is what you guys should do now. So click on one of the black letters, hold shift, and click on the other four. Then you will see in the appearance panel, the fill is just black because it's consistent between them. So we can then change that fill to be white. And there we go. We didn't have to ungroup it to do so. You guys doing okay with that one? Anything confusing there? All right, so when it comes to alignment, grouping can actually be very, very useful. I'll actually demonstrate a scenario where not grouping would cause a bit of an issue. So with these two items that we just aligned to the horizontal center, we didn't have to group them. That worked very nicely. We could just select both of them and align them. What we're going to do is we're going to select both of those guys once again. And this time we're going to align them to the vertical center. So in your properties panel, by align, you will see we have align vertical centers. So I'm going to click align vertical centers. And there you guys should see the problem. Right, so what I can see here is that the picture evolve is directly on top because remember we aligned to the page. So both of them are aligned directly in the center. because they are two completely separate objects. So I'm just going to hit undo. I also suspect that this partial class calendar might be behind the this text here. So I'm also just going to bring it to the front. So you can always just right click and say arrange, bring to front, or you can use the shortcut Control Shift right square bracket. Either one will work. Right, so we brought this guy to the front. That's very helpful. Then I make sure that both of them are selected once again. I can see both of those guys are selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to group them. So you can do this by right clicking and saying group. And there you'll see the shortcut Control G, which is nice and easy to remember. Control G to group. Now, once it's grouped, it acts like one object. So if we do decide to align it to the vertical center now, there you'll see it's kept that distance between the two objects. So grouping can be very useful when aligning things to help make sure that the relative distance is maintained. Okay, I'm just going to undo that because, of course, we didn't actually want that in the center. It was just for demonstration purposes. We are going to do one more little exercise on alignment now. So you will see just to the left of this particular page, we have a whole lot of icons, which relates to the elements in this table here. There is already one icon which is in its correct place. So that's this little guy here, next to computer graphics intro. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all just select that one. And then you're going to hold Shift and go select the others. Now, in your alignment settings, you might have noticed there is the option to align to a key object. When I choose align to key object, by default, it's chosen this one here. And the only reason I know that is because it's given it a slightly thicker outline. It's possible that we chose that one first, and that's why it's got that is now the key object. But you don't have to do it that way. You can always select all of the items you want, and then just click on whichever one you would like to be your key object. So it just so happens that I do want it to be to this computer graphics intro. That is the key object I want. Now, with it aligned to that key object, I can go and say align left edges. Why not? Align left edges. There we go. They're all aligned to this little guy here. Now, you guys might notice that two of these icons are not really the same size as the others. I like uniformity, especially when it comes to icons. So we can check that things are exactly the same size, provided they are at least somewhat in the same ratio. So if you've got squares, it's very easy. You can keep them all square. But let's have a look. So if I click on, say, this first icon next to computer graphics, I see that this has got a width and a height value of 2.0888 2.0887 picas. Right, so that is a perfect square with that very specific number. If I click on the one below it, it's nearly a square, but it's got slightly different values. It's actually slightly bigger. So that one is the same size. This one is ever so slightly different. There's sort of obviously in the ballpark. It's only really the Adobe Acrobat icons that are off. But what I like to do is I like to sort of get them all being exactly the same. So if I click on this one here, I usually decide to sort of round it up or down. Apologies, guys seem to have dropped off for a second there, just trying to get that sorted once again. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Whew. All right, cool. So, as I was saying, I don't remember what I was saying. So what I like to do is I kind of like to just pick a size. And especially if they're not square or round, perfectly round, perfectly symmetrical, then I'll just pick whether it's going to be the width or the height that is the determining factor here. I think height in this particular scenario will be more important. So what I'll do is in this transformation panel, I'll hop on over to the height, and just next to it, you'll see there's a little link. If yours is broken, like mine is here, just click on that link so that it is connected. So it looks like a solid link. That'll make sure if we change the height, the width will change as well. And what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to round it down to 2 picas because that's going to be nice and even. If I want, I can even just write 2p. So 2p. And if I hit enter, you'll see the size is now 2 picas. So I can do that for each of these guys. Another way to do it is just put your cursor in there and you can press the down arrow. And that will round it down. So I'm just making each of these 2 picas. Now, the only issue with this method inside of InDesign is you might see that it is changing the frame size and not necessarily the picture inside it. So if I look at these guys here, the Adobe Acrobat icons, I can see that they have essentially been distorted. So in the frame fitting options, we might then just go and say, fill frame proportionally for all of them. So you can even select all of them altogether just to do that. And if you need to align them once again, because they've shifted during that process, well, we know how to do that. All right. So that is some basic alignment and transformation, simple stuff, but kind of bread and butter stuff as well. Let's move on to our last two items, which are less frequently used, but it's good to do them. So I'm going to scroll up. And the first thing we're going to do is perhaps a little bit more miscellaneous than the next one, and that is to add in a QR code. So we are going to go do that now. Sorry, my brain's just drawn a blank. There we go. Under Object, you will find Generate QR Code. So that's the Object menu and Generate QR Code. It's going to bring up this dialog box here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to choose what is in that QR code. So I'm going to say web hyperlink. And then you could just go copy the URL. So, head over to whichever website you want to use. So, you've got the website that you want to use there. And just go select the text, copy it out, and paste it into that URL. And then you can go ahead and say, OK. Once you've done that, it'll give you a loaded cursor icon, and you can go and draw that into, well, any spot you want.
Andrew?
Yeah.
Just go one step back. So I did the object in generate QR code. I copied the leading training, which is fine, and I said okay. Oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
I didn't say okay. Sorry. Now it's big. Okay, so how do I just make it smaller?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so once your QR code is there, you guys can test it out. So grab your phone, switch on your camera, and aim it at that QR code to see if it works. If it doesn't, you might need to increase the display performance. So you might need to go to View, Display Performance, and High Quality Display. There we go. Now it works.
Andrew?
Yeah.
Why does my QR code, it comes very large and it like basically pastes itself? It doesn't like attach to my cursor.
It's possible that you maybe had selected a frame, maybe. That's a guess. I'm not 100% sure what happened, but it's possible that if you were selected on something like maybe the background wasn't locked and you clicked on the pink frame, it's possible. Yeah, that's so maybe try it again, but just before you do it, then click onto nothing to deselect, and then you can go up and try it again. See, and tell me if that sorts it out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
One of these was also better.
Andrew, once it's copied, you said view and then you change it to?
Display performance.
Okay, cool. Display performance, high quality. Awesome. Thank
Correct.
you.
All right, guys. So just looking at this area here, I actually realized I forgot to do something in this little column here. So if you look at this column, look at me, it doesn't look terrible, but it looks a bit odd that we've got this sort of main title, Sylvia B, and then the actual text about her is on the next page and it cuts off pretty soon. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a column break, which will force this text into the next column. So what you can do there is put your cursor just before Sylvia, just before the S. And once you've done that, you can go up to type, insert break character, and you should see column break there. And we can do the same thing for Jeff G. So put your cursor before Jeff G and repeat the process. Type, insert break character, column break. All right, guys. Any trouble with the column breaks there? You doing all right? So if you guys haven't had any trouble with that, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a little arrow. The process for this is almost identical to Illustrator. We need to start off with just a very simple line. So what you'll find just beneath your type tool in your toolbars is your line tool. So that's this guy over here. So grab your line tool. And you're just going to draw a line from the column here to the edge of customer testimonials. And if you want it to be perfectly straight, just hold Shift while you're drawing it. So now I've got my line here. Now a line doesn't have a fill. So in spite of the fact that in the appearance you see a fill there, that's not really relevant. It's the stroke that we're interested in. So we've got the stroke, and the stroke is currently black. We're going to make it a little bit bigger, and we're going to change some elements about it. Now we can change some of the elements about it right here on the face of the appearance panel. But if you click on the word stroke, you're going to get more options available to you. So we can increase the weight a little bit. We can fiddle with the ends to make them rounded or flat. Joins aren't really going to make a difference here because it's a straight line, so I won't be able to really show you anything there. The alignment, it's not really going to make a difference to this particular scenario because we're not inside or outside of a shape. What we are interested in is the start and the end. So this is where you can put things like arrowheads. So on the left-hand side, we're going to choose the circle solid. And on the right-hand side, we're going to choose, well, you can actually choose whichever arrow you like. I'm going to go for curved. Oh dear, I've actually chosen it on the wrong ones. So if you happen to have chosen it on, and it's backwards, right? So if you look at mine, the arrow is on the wrong side compared to the tail. You don't have to go and reselect everything. You can actually just flip it. So if you check, there's a little swap icon between those two start and end profiles. So you can just click that and that'll flip around. So it really doesn't matter if you got it right the first time or not. All right. So that is lesson 4. So if we want to sort of have a squiz at what we've done, we can zoom out to look at the spread. So the shortcut for that is Control-Alt-0. And I'll look at the spread there, and then I'll just tap W to get a bit of a preview to see all of the things that we've done. Cool. So we're going to put lesson 4 to rest now. And as I promised yesterday, the first thing that we're going to kick off with is going to be revision. So I always think it's very important to maximize the basics to make sure we're very, very comfortable with that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to close up lesson 4. You don't need to save this file. That's fine. We can just close that up. We're going to start by creating a new file. So we're going to go to create new. And of course, we want to put this into the context of something we might actually want to create, something we want to design. So let's say we are going to be creating a little course manual. Let's say it's an A5 size. What we would do is we would head over to the print presets and we would be hopeful that maybe it has A5 already as a preset. So we head over there and we say view all presets, and I see that it does happen to have an A5 default there, or sorry, preset. So I've gone to create a new document. I've gone to the print presets. I've chosen A5, and I see that once again it's in picas, which is an American unit that we don't really understand. So let's change that to something we do understand, millimeters. And you might remember from previous lessons, always change the units before you change the numbers. So change the units to millimeters, and you can see it automatically calculates and makes the change into millimeters. So I don't need to make any adjustments there. 148 by 210 is perfectly fine for an A5. The orientation, you can swap those, but you'll see it actually flips the width and height. So I'm going to keep that as portrait. Then in the facing pages, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to keep that. How many columns do I want? I'm going to keep that at 1. I don't want multiple columns. Then the margins, I usually leave that on the default, but you can increase that if you want. And the bleed. So the bleed we haven't added yet. We have kind of mentioned it before. The bleed is where you trim off edges. So if you're going to cut something out, like a business card, you would definitely print on a piece of paper and then cut it out. If you're going to be essentially guillotining off the edges, you probably want a bleed. If you're not, don't worry about it. So we're going to add a little bit of a bleed. Let's say 3 millimeters, 3 millimeter bleed. And once you've got all of those settings locked in, we can go ahead and say create. Right, so I've got my my page up here. Now remember, by default we start on page 1, but we might want to work on our master pages to get some designs coming through there. So let's head over to our pages window and double click on the master page. Okay, so we're on our master page here now. And what we can do is we can begin to think about what sort of design elements we want to have. And really, it can be anything that looks appealing to you. So I'm going to start off simple. I'm going to draw a rectangle down the center of this spine on the spread here. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle from the margins, or from margin to margin all the way down. I'm going to give that a color. Pick any color you like.
Just a minute. How did you create a master page?
So go to your pages window. And double click on a master.
Okay. I think I still.
Now, just a small note on using color and bleeds. If you are going to use color like I'm using color here, you can see my color is supposed to go right to the edge of the paper. Just remember, if it does, it needs to go right to the edge of the bleed. Right, so I've just got some color in the center there, nothing particularly amazing. But then a thought occurs to me. Inside these margins is where my text is going to appear. So if I have text, it's going to line up right along the outside edges here. It's going to be right against this rectangle. There's not going to be a gap. Not quite what I want. So I'm going to create a little bit of space on either side. And we can do that pretty easily. If I select this, now watch me do this. If I drag in this side, it's just going to drag in the right-hand side, right? But then I'd have to make sure that I'm doing that evenly, which is difficult. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hold Alt. And I hold Alt and then drag it in. You will see that both sides come in by the same amount. That gives me just that little bit of breathing room on either side. Now, I've got my rectangle up here. That's looking good. You might remember from yesterday, we added some page numbers, but now this time we're going to add page numbers with a bit of a twist. We're going to add it inside a circle. So this is what I'm going to do to start. I'm just going to draw a circle to begin with. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, which you will find over here. Grab my ellipse tool. And I'm just going to zoom in down to the bottom left-hand corner here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle that will be at the end, half the size of this distance here between the margin. But this is how I'm going to do it. First, I'm going to click and drag from the corner of that margin to the bottom of the page, but hold Shift. Make sure you get your perfect little circle there. And then you can give it a fill color just so we can actually see it. My little ellipse, and my ellipse is currently the full size of that margin, right? I want it to be roughly about half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to my properties panel in the transform section. And first of all, I just want to make sure that that reference point is set to the center. So I'm just going to choose center for my reference point. And then the next thing I'm going to check is that the constrained proportions is selected. This little link is selected, solid. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to halve this amount here. Now, you could work it out yourself, but why do that when you can let InDesign do it for you? So place your cursor at the end of that value and hit /2. Then divide that value by 2. So that's /2 divided by 2. So there's my little circle. Right. So now I've got my little circle there. I want to pop some text into it. All I have to do is switch to my type tool by hitting T on my keyboard or by selecting it in the toolbar and hover over the shape. And as Chanel correctly told us yesterday, if we see this circular icon over a shape, that means it's going to put the text into the shape. So if I click now, you will see that it essentially turns that shape into a text box. It's now functioning like a text box. And once it's functioning like a text box, we can put a page number in there. So I'm going to go to type, insert special character, markers, current page number. And don't forget to hit escape once you're done. Now, you might remember yesterday we managed to get that text inside that sort of pink fuchsia looking rectangle to be in the center. We did that with our text frame options. We want to do one step just before that, which is very, very simple. And that is just to align the paragraph to the center. So just like you would align a paragraph to the center in something like Microsoft Word. So in your properties panel, you'll see paragraph, and there, that second option, align to center. So now that's going to be in the horizontal center of the text frame. So that's one thing. But in order to get it into the center of the vertical center, we'll need to go to our text frame options, which you might remember you can get to by just right-clicking. So if you right-click and say text frame options, we can then say align to the center. So align to the center. And then we can say, okay. All right, we're going to continue with this particular exercise. So don't get rid of what you currently have, but we are going to take a tea break now. And when we get back, we're going to add in some extra frames into our content. So yeah, I'll see you guys at 10 to 11. Is that all right?
Perfect.
Cool. All right, I'll see you guys then.